Hey y'all, welcome to part one of a new series dedicated and geared toward the Vectric software titles for the absolute beginner. Now let me start with a little disclaimer right up front. I am not endorsed nor sponsored by Vectric Ltd. Or any other company. They don't even know I'm alive, other than they said thank you for purchasing the license for the software. I'm gearing this series to the absolute beginner who has never done anything like this before. So with that in mind, I'd like to speak to the more seasoned veteran here and just remind you that none of us were born with this knowledge. We didn't absorb this information by magic. We all had to learn it somewhere. So if you think maybe this series is a little too basic for you, then I'll invite you to check out some of my other videos on more advanced topics. So having said that, you are cordially invited to stay and watch, and hopefully you'll pick up a nugget of information or two here and there. So when we first get into the Vectric software, this is the screen that we're greeted with. Now you'll see up here that I'm using VCarve Pro version 9.015. But everything I'm going to show you here is applicable to Cut 2D, both Pro and Desktop, VCarve Pro and Desktop, and Aspire. So everything that I'm going to show you will be identical. So when we first start up the software, this is the screen that we're greeted with, and our choices are pretty limited. If we look up here into the toolbar, those of us who have the Pro version of either Cut 2D or VCarve will have gadgets up here, but the desktop versions do not support gadgets or scripting. So we'll all have File and Help, and that's about all we can do from here. If we look over on the left panel here, we have some common startup tasks. Create a new file, open an existing file, and down here is a list of recently opened files. These are the last 4 that I have had open. So if you've never saved a file, you won't have anything over here. Now Vectric has also made it very easy to access their video tutorials. You have a link right here that opens up the index of their video tutorials. You can also access that from within the software by clicking the Help menu, coming down here to, there it is, the video tutorial browser. That'll open up a web browser page with all their video tutorials listed by project and by topic. So Help is pretty easy to find here within the software. Down below we also have some online resources, the Vectric support website and the Vectric support forum, which I encourage you to become a member of and check out. Then down below here we have a link to Design and Make, which is a subsidiary website run by Vectric Ltd. That specializes in projects, clip art, and models for use with the Vectric software. Let's go ahead and start getting into the software. Now, as I said, mainly the main 2 options we have here are creating a new file and opening an existing file. So let's start out by creating a new file, because that's something that all of us are going to have to do eventually. So I'll just click the link here, and that immediately puts us into our job setup form. We also have a representation of some material on the top of our work surface, which is what this represents back here. Every project you begin, if you're designing your own files, is going to start with the job setup. And it's just a case of starting at the top and working our way down. And we'll start with the job type. Is this a single-sided job or a double-sided job? Meaning, are you just going to be carving on this side of the material, or are you going to be carving on both sides of the material? Most beginners begin with a single-sided job, and you'll find over time that about 75% of the jobs you want to do are single-sided, maybe more. So we just make sure that our little radio button here is checked in the correct place for single-sided or double-sided. Then we're okay and we can move down. Now we come down here to job size. This is the width in X and the height in Y of the material itself. This is not the size of the design. We'll get into that a little bit later on. So this is the piece of material that you're going to be working with. And you can approach this in a couple of different ways. One, you can create a file for a piece of material that you have on hand right now, or you can create a file that can later be adapted or resized for a piece of material that you're going to get. So no matter which way you go, I do have a little bit of free advice here. And that is to get a set of inexpensive calipers to measure the thickness of your material. When we will enter our X and Y sizes here, then we'll enter the thickness of the material. Now you'll see here I have 0.75 inches. That's the most common size people will use, but that comes with a caveat in that if you've been around woodworking at all for any length of time, you know that finding a piece of material that's absolutely 3/4 of an inch thick is pretty rare. More often than not, it's, if you're using solid hardwood, it's thicker than 3/4 of an inch, and if you're using sheet goods, it's much thinner than 3/4 of an inch. So a pair of calipers so you can measure your material will really help out a lot when it comes to setting the thickness of the material. If we've got a piece of material in mind for it and we already know the dimensions, now is the time to enter this dimension here. My most popular sign that I cut and carve is 14 inches wide in X and 10.5 inches high in Y. Now I've purposely set these up here so that I would have to change them, because even though that's going to be the size of my finished sign, that is not the size of the piece of material I'm going to cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the size of the actual piece of material in these blanks here. And what I like to do for a 14-inch wide sign, I will add 2 inches to that. That gives me room out here for screws, clamps, or some other way of mounting the material down onto the CNC table. So let's go with a 16-inch width in X, and you'll see it updated automatically. And for the height in Y, if you go down to the Home Improvement Center and you buy a, let's, for purposes of discussion, say a Select Pine 1x12, that measurement is nominal. It's not 1 inch thick and it's not 12 inches wide. It's actually 11.25 inches high in Y. So with those two entered, I can now come down here to my Z thickness. And that is the thickness of the material that we're going to start with. Occasionally you'll come across a piece that is actually 3/4 of an inch, but more often than not they're closer to 13/16 of an inch thick. And this is where a pair of calipers will really help you out. And I'm also going to give you a little tidbit, a little nugget of information here, a little tip, that if you know the fractional measurement of something, but you're not a decimal person and you don't quite know the decimal equivalent, the Vectric software has calculators built into it that will help you do that conversion. So, for instance, if I find that my piece of material here is actually 13/16 of an inch thick, what I'll do is I'll highlight everything in that box, and I will type 13 /16. Then on my keyboard I will hit the equal sign, and it does the conversion for me. So I don't have to find a converter online and figure it out for myself. Just remember to use that equal sign after you enter that fractional measurement, and it'll do the conversion for you. The units I'm using are inches. I prefer to set my Z0 position, that is where I'm going to zero my bit, to the top of the material surface. Now, there's some controversy here. Some folks prefer to zero their material on the machine bed down here, and that's fine. This is another one of those cases where there really is no best. It's whichever you prefer to use. If you're not sure or you're first starting, the easier way is to set it to the material surface. Then you don't have to get into offsets and things of that nature. Speaking of offsets, we'll move down here to the XY datum position. That simply means where are we going to index our X and Y zeros. Now the way it's set up right now, these are set in the center. I could just as easily set it to the lower left corner down here. And when I go to calculate toolpaths, I will set it for the lower left corner because that's where I prefer to set my X, Y, and Z zeros. But when I'm designing up here in VCarve, and I'm just starting to lay things out and drawing vectors, I prefer to set my X and Y datum to the center because that gives me a good frame of reference to place objects and vectors out here in my work area. I do not use an offset. That's a more advanced technique that we'll get into in another video because it's outside of the scope of this video. My modeling resolution in this case is the resolution at which the 3D model, when we start drawing, will be rendered. I'm using standard in this case, and I would say about 75% of the time I do use a standard resolution. I will only go into the higher resolutions when I get into 3D modeling. The appearance here, I have pine selected because that's the most common material that I work with in V-carving signs. But if you click this drop-down menu, there are all kinds of different materials. There are, as you can see, solid colors. There are woods here, metals, stone, and then various miscellaneous. Down here we have plastics and what have you. I just select pine because it's an easy color to see. When I calculate toolpaths, you'll see what I mean by that. I can get a lot of contrast with my toolpath colors, and it's something that's familiar to just about everybody. So having gotten down to the bottom, we are finished with our job setup. From here I can cancel and just exit this, or I can click OK, and all of these settings will be applied to my piece of work material here. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and our job is set up. Now, if you look up above, because we have a file started, we have a whole bunch of different options open to us. We didn't have edit before because there was nothing to edit. We didn't have model before because you have to have a job set up before you can import a model. And on down the list. Everything that we just set up in job setup can be edited and it can be changed. And the way we access that is to go back up to this icon right here, set job dimensions and origin. We'll click that and it opens the job setup again. Everything can be changed, everything can be edited. Now another free piece of advice I'm going to give you, as soon as we get our job setup finished, and we've got this set up the way we want to, is to go straight up here to the File menu and save the file. The reason I say that is a lot of people forget that you have two files to save when you're working in CAD/CAM software. You have the file itself as well as the G-code. And it's real easy to forget to save this file and just concentrate on getting your G-code. So let me go ahead, and it's fairly self-explanatory if you've worked with computers before. Go to the File menu, click Save As. This window will open. You'll navigate to the proper folder where you want to save it. Come down here, and I'm going to name this Demo 2 because I already have Demo 1 up here. Save. Okay. It now changes the title of our file that we're working with from New to Demo 2. When you go to close the file, if you make any changes at all, it will ask you, do you want to save those changes? So let me go ahead and just real quick add something there, and I'll close it, and it asks me, the file has been changed. Do you want to save your changes? I can choose yes, no, or if I decide I don't want to close the file after all, I can just hit cancel. Another option that we have available to us here in the welcome screen is to open an existing file. And again, this is pretty self-explanatory if you've been using the computer for any length of time. We'll just click that link. It'll open up Windows Explorer, and we can go to navigate to the proper folder and select the file we want to open up. Click on it once to select it, click Open, and it'll open up our file. Now, I've created this file here just to show you some of the basic navigation within VCarve. And I'm going to use the phrase VCarve or VCarve Pro a lot in this series. Just know that when I say that, unless I tell you otherwise, everything includes Cut2D, VCarve, and Aspire. I'm just used to working with VCarve, so I'm used to calling it VCarve. So if we look over here in our Toolbox, we can see we're separated into a few categories. We have file operations up here, which will basically do a lot of the things, more common things that are found up here in the menu bar, like create a new empty file, open an existing file, save the current file, cut, copy, paste, undo, redo, and then of course our job setup as we discussed before. Down here we have create vectors. This is the area that you'll use when you go to draw a circle or draw some text or convert text to curves, things of that nature. And we'll get into this a little bit further in future videos. Down here we have transform objects. Here is where we'll move something, resize it, rotate it, mirror it, or distort it, things of that nature, or even align it. Down here we get into editing objects, where we'll go into node editing mode, we'll move things, transform, rotate, we'll group or ungroup certain objects, measure. There are all kinds of different options down here for editing an object out here on our workpiece. Then down below we have offsets and layouts. That's generally used to either create an array of the same objects rather than drawing all 50 stars to make a flag. You can draw one star and then create separate arrays that will space them for you. So you only have to draw one star, for instance. There are other functions down here, but right now they're outside of the scope of this video. Basically what I want to do is I want to show you where to find the various tools and then show you some of the basic navigation. Like when I say click off, I mean move the cursor out here into a blank portion of the work material that is not anywhere near one of these vectors. Left click to click off. If I come out here into a blank portion and I right click, I get this kind of context menu. I can undo the last thing I did, redo the last thing I just undid, and just on down the line. I can do certain things. Some things are grayed out because I have nothing selected. When it comes to selecting items, and I'll use that phrase, selecting vectors or selecting objects, what I mean is the easiest way to select one is to just put your cursor tip over the vector and click on it. You'll see it changed from I'll click off of it here. You'll see it changed from black lines to a pink dotted line. That lets you know that that object is selected. That means that anything I do over here or by right-clicking and going into that context menu will affect this object only. It won't affect anything else out here. Okay? Now there are multiple ways of selecting objects. One is to put the cursor over the object and just click. If you want to select more than one object, you'll select the first one, hold down the Shift key, come over to the next one that you wish to select and click on it. Then go to the next one you want to select and click on it. Now I'm still holding down the Shift key. If I decide after doing this that I didn't mean to select this one and I want to deselect it, I'll just come back and click it again. And that deselects this object but keeps these two objects selected. Now I've just released the Shift key. Now I'll click off and deselect all of them. So that's one way of selecting and then deselecting a single object, hold down Shift, or multiple objects. Another way to select objects is to drag a box. Now what I mean by that is if I come up here away from any of the vectors and I click and hold my left mouse button, you can see I'm drawing a box. That's a selection box. Now the direction that you pull that selection box matters, and I'll show you why. We'll go over here to these two. If I start over here well below the top of this circle, if I start right here and click and hold and drag that box to where that box is completely around that rectangle but not completely around to that circle, then let go, it selects the rectangle only. It does not select the circle. I'll do that again so you can see what I mean. I'll click and drag the box around that rectangle and it selects the rectangle only. That's dragging from left to right. Let me click off here. Now if I drag from right to left, all that box has to do is touch a vector. And you see both the circle and the rectangle were selected. So that's a quick way of selecting multiple vectors, is to just draw the box from right to left to where that box is just touching the vectors. They do not have to be completely inside. click off, and I'll come down here and I'll grab those two just by touching these vectors. But if I just want to select that circle and don't want to select that rectangle, I can just draw a box around it from left to right, and it selects the circle only. So the direction that you pull your selection box in matters. And this is really handy if you need to just select a few vectors that are within other vectors, because maybe you need to move this, or maybe you need to move this. It's a quick way of selecting vectors without selecting other vectors. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this introductory video to the Vectric software Cut 2D, VCarve, and Aspire. Now I'm going to make the best attempt possible during this series to keep the technical jargon to a minimum, but some of it is unavoidable. Now some of you may have already noticed that I'm using the phrase vector, or the word vector, to describe these objects here. Now if you're not certain what a vector is, I created a video last year that I'll link up here in a card that will explain exactly what a vector is. Now I know some of you seasoned veterans are rolling your eyes so hard right now that you can see your brain. But let me ask you, what is a vector? And don't say that it's a line, because you'd be wrong. If you want to know what I mean by that, go watch the video. I think you'll find a few nuggets that you can use. I'm going to go ahead and close out this video now. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comments section below. If you need to get a hold of me, or you don't want to put a comment down below, I hope you'll head on over to my website, marklindsaycnc.com. My website is sponsored by Harneal Media. If you hit my homepage, come down here and hit the Contact Us form or link. You can fill in your question or comment or what have you and submit it to me. I do read every single submission I get, and I try to answer all of them. I try to answer as many as humanly possible. Unless, you're like a foreign prince who's trying to move a couple of $1 billion, then you'll probably not get a reply from me. And while you're over there, I also have a page that details the CNC process for the absolute beginner. If you're confused by anything that has to do with a CNC router, it's a good place to start. Again, if you got anything out of this video, please give me a thumbs up down below. If you'd like to continue to follow this series or check out some of my other CNC adventures, I do hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. But as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very, very much for watching, and y'all take care.